Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball. I'm back with Boom Buster Believable, the series where I take a deep dive into Big Ten men's basketball teams and figure out whether they've boomed, they're a bust, or if they're right where they belong. Coming in at third on the Big Ten preseason poll, we've got the Maryland Terrapins, straight out of College Park, Maryland. Let's run it. So Maryland right now currently is coming in at 14-13, just barely above 500, and 6-10 in the Big Ten. They were predicted to be high at the beginning of or high in the Big Ten rankings at the beginning of the season. That hasn't quite worked out. They're currently sitting at 12th. Heading in some key players for the Terrapins. Starting out, always got to go through the main guy for them, Jameer Young. He's currently sitting at 21.1 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1.3 steals per game, shooting 92.2% from the free throw line and 35% from three. He is an all Big Ten guard. He has been tearing up teams this season. But the problem is the guys around him haven't necessarily stepped up. A guy that has been able to help him out quite a bit this season is Julian Reese. He's averaging 13.8 points, 10 rebounds, and 1.1 steals per game, as well as 2 blocks per game. Another guy that's been solid for them is Donta Scott. So he's currently sitting at 11.6 points, 4.9 rebounds per game, and shooting 79.7% from the free throw line and 33.6% from three. And another guy rounding out the top 4 is actually an incoming true freshman, Deshaun Harris-Smith. He's been a valuable guy that they're going to look to continue to get more and more action as he matures and gets more adjusted to the college game throughout the year. Deshaun Harris-Smith has been averaging 6.9 points, 4.4 rebounds, 2.1 assists, and 1 steals per game. So as a freshman, he's been a very valuable role player. He hasn't been able to step up, I'm sure, as much as he would like, but he has been a valuable addition to this team. Overall, it just hasn't necessarily helped them get everything together, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Speaking of some of those, we get into the Ken Pom rankings. So Maryland currently sits at 160th in adjusted offensive efficiency. So they're not a super efficient offensive team. And that's definitely shown in a lot of their games. But they have one of the best defenses in the nation, currently sitting at 6th in the country in adjusted defensive efficiency. That's been something that has been common for Maryland in these past couple of years. They really get after you, and their defense has been fantastic, a real highlight for them over these last couple of years as a team. In terms of adjusted tempo, they're sitting at 300th, so they're not a super fast team. They not really get out in the break very much. They're also currently sitting at 53rd in the country overall as adjusted efficiency margin. In terms of their strength of schedule, they're sitting at 35th. So they have a pretty hard schedule. As you find, most teams in the Big Ten typically are listed to have a top 50 or top 75 at least strength of schedule, just because the overall quality in the Big Ten is decently high top to bottom, even though there may not necessarily be a ton of super high quality teams. The quality overall just is there. Going into some of the key wins and losses for Maryland, early on in the season, they had a loss at home against Davidson, 64-61, and that was the first, on a neutral court. That was actually the first game of the Asheville Championship on November 10th. So that was their holiday tournament back in the beginning of November. So not a loss that they want to take. Davidson's obviously not a very good mid-major this year. They haven't really proved all that much. So a very close game that they very much would have liked to win. Going on later, coming into the new year, they actually had a very important win for them, a win at number 10 Illinois at the time, 76-67. So they got the offense going in that one, and they were able to hold Illinois, who is a very good offensive team, to 67 points. That just proves, again, is how good their defense can be. That was back on January 14th. They followed that up about 2 weeks later with a win at home against Nebraska, 73-51. So you're starting to see a trend here is none of these games have any of the other team that they've been facing have scored over 70. They are a very, very good defense. It kind of just depends on how much their offense shows up. But a 22-point win against a very good Nebraska team, even though it came at home, and we know Nebraska is a much better team playing at home versus away, it was still a very solid win for Maryland nonetheless. And that was back on January 27th. But more recently, the beginning of February, they took a home loss against Rutgers, 56-53. So again, they did a great job limiting Rutgers, but their offense just was not on that day. And they, another close game that they really would have liked to get back. Going into the season, though, the Terps had pretty high expectations with a return of starters like Jameer Young, Julian Reese, and Donta Scott, combined with a top 15 recruiting class, including guys like Deshaun Harris-Smith and transfers like Jordan Geronimo from Indiana. It seemed like a roster with a solid combination of veteran presence from a Maryland team that had some considerate success last year and new faces that could provide some serious role depth throughout the lineup. But something about this team just hasn't lived up to expectations, and that something has been the offense. Jameer Young is playing at an all Big Ten level this season, behind only Zach Edey in points per game in the Big Ten. Young, Julian Reese, and Donta Scott are the heart and soul of this team, but outside of them, this team struggles to score the ball. As a team, they average just short of 70 points per game on offense, but the redeeming quality of this team, and the biggest reason why they've won 14 games, is their defense. As I mentioned, Ken Pom has them as the 6th best defense in the country, and they really get after teams on the defensive end. As a team, they average right around 7 steals per game and hold opponents to 65 points per game. With active hands, intense on-ball pressure, and solid help defense, the Terps make it difficult to get easy buckets and get out in transition after turnovers. A decent amount of their offense comes from getting points off turnovers, which, is crucial for most teams, except for Maryland. They almost rely on it a little bit too much. Quite frankly, this team isn't all that different from last year's team statistically, when that team reached as high as number 13 in the AP poll last year and made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. They averaged 69.7 points per game last year compared to the 69.9 that they're averaging this year right now, as well as they gave up 63.5 points per game to opponents compared to 65 points per game this year. So you're looking at almost identical averages in both categories there. But the main difference, it's winning close games. Out of their 13 losses, 9 of them have been by 5 points or less, and 6 of them were by 3 points or less. So we could be talking about this team very, very differently if they just found ways to win close games. But that's the biggest difference between a good team and a great team. We talked about this with Purdue, but this is the flip side of that coin. Whereas Purdue has found ways to win most of their close games this year, outside of 2 of their 3 losses realistically, Maryland has lost almost all of their close games. They could very well be a tournament team if they were able to close out even half of their losses by 5 or less points. But instead, at 14-13, they're on the outside looking in when it comes to the NCAA tournament, and they have a lot of work to do with their remaining games and the Big Ten tournament if they want a chance to seal a bid. Realistically, it's looking like it's going to be a Big Ten tournament champion, or the season's done for the Terrapins. So we'll see what they're able to do with their last couple of regular season games, but it just seems like a bit of a lost season for Maryland this year. But that's all I've got for today. Here on Running the Table, we're counting down the days to March, and it is right around the corner. I'm going to keep trying to get out as many of these episodes as I can before the madness, so stay tuned, like and subscribe for more. But until next time, I'm out.